I'm really excited to be here with all of you in person. I know that the last 8 or 9 weeks have taken you away from your families, have caused you maybe some late nights, maybe some anxiety-inducing problem sets, and that I personally might have been responsible for some of those. But I don't feel bad about that, because what it taught me is it taught me that all of you have an amazing ability to persevere. And it also taught me something else. You have an incredible amount of courage. You've taken the courage to take on this big, huge undertaking. First time this has ever been offered. You have the courage to push yourselves in huge numbers of directions, right? The courses in this program mean that you're pushing yourselves in things outside your comfort zone. And you've had the courage to make sacrifices from your own life and those of the people around you. So it turns out that what I know about all of you is that you are amazing at persevering and that you have an amount of courage. So, given that, I have one last assignment for you.
Oh, no.
This is assignment number 9. Now, the good news is that it's actually very simple to state. I don't have a Google Doc or anything to share with you. The bad news is the due date. This particular assignment will take you a lifetime. But I hope that you think it's a worthwhile assignment. So, without further ado, assignment 9, I want you to help me make our field inclusive. Now, inclusive is a little bit of a meme these days, and I don't know that it has a meaning, so I want to give you a very precise meaning. When I say I want our field to be inclusive, I want it to be a place where our daughters are never asked with that incredulous intonation, "You're an engineer?" Or where our colleagues of color never hear, "Oh yeah, you got that because you're black." Or where our minority candidates hear, "Oh yeah, you got hired because we had to fill a quota."
Yeah.
Or maybe where your differently abled colleagues are told, "You can't do that." Basically, I want to create a world where no one is ever made to feel that they don't belong because they're different. So, let us get started right now. Those of you in the room who think that you're out, you're done with this assignment because you don't belong to any of these underrepresented groups, au contraire. Okay, this is an assignment for everyone. It is not the job of the underrepresented to solve this problem. It is our collective job to solve that problem. Okay, so we're going to start right now, right here, and I'm going to award extra credit to all of you in the room who are in fact from underrepresented groups because you've been working on this assignment your whole life. So there we go, we start with some extra credit. So I'm going to tell stories to emphasize these facts that are based on my experience. So most of them are about gender, but I think you can substitute any other underrepresented group for gender and the same things apply. So I like to start with the story of a cup of coffee. And I like to start with this story because on one hand it is stupid and ridiculous, and on the other I think it's sort of profound in what we can take away from it. So I'm 22 or 23, it's my first job out of college, and I'm at a high-tech startup. Okay, so this is in the days before full-service meals 3 times a day, but usually companies did have company coffee, and it was horrible. So a bunch of us got together, we bought our own little coffee pot, and people chipped in, we had a little coffee clutch, and you chipped in a quarter if you wanted the good coffee. And I bought the coffee, and my colleague Alan would buy the cream, and we were all happy. So a new guy started at work, and we invited him to join our coffee clutch. And one day he sticks his head in my office, and he says, "Oh, we're out of cream." And I said, "Oh, I do the coffee, Alan does the cream." About 2 hours later, he sticks his head in my office, he's like, "We're out of cream." Sorry, didn't I make myself clear? I do the coffee, Alan does the cream. And he said, "Well, how can I bother him with that?" And I said, "You can bother me?" I said, "Go away." And maybe that would have been the end of it, but later that day, I'm walking down the hall and he's walking toward me. And I said, "Don't even talk to me, I'm kind of still mad at you." And he held out his cup of coffee and he said, "Could you get me a cup of coffee?" And I turned around and I walked into my boss's office and I said, "Make it stop." And the good news is that they made it stop. So what do we take away from that? Okay, if you are in one of these underrepresented groups, what you take away is speak up, right? Speak up when it's small and hasn't gotten big, right? Because then you can laugh about the cup of coffee. If you don't speak up, people don't know it's a problem. Yeah, it's a little bit scary. But here's the secret. You have to act like it's the most natural thing in the world. Because you know what? Being treated with respect is actually the most natural thing in the world, and it is something you should expect. So those of us who are in underrepresented groups, we need to speak up. Now the rest of you, You too have to speak up. When you see something, you have to say something. It's like, oh, but that feels really awkward. Yeah, well, think about how it feels to be the person to whom it's being said. It's way more awkward for him or her, right? So say something. And if you're the person that I walk into and say, make it stop, your job is to make it stop. If you're the manager, then you get to manage. If you're not the manager, you still have to do something. That something can be walking into HR, it can be walking into your manager, it could be taking a colleague and saying, you know, we don't do that here. This is a phrase I read in an article that I think covers a multitude of situations. We don't do that here. Okay? If you delegate this to somebody else, you go talk to your manager, you actually have the job then to follow up and make sure that something gets fixed. Okay? So that's lesson 1. Speak up. Hard, you bet. But what do I know about you? You are all courageous, and you all know how to persevere. So you can do this. You've got this. Okay. Number 2. So I teach operating systems. Operating systems is like the bastion of testosterone. Okay, this is the macho of systems. So we don't often have a lot of women in the class. 15% maybe. So for reasons that will become obvious in a moment, I do blind grading, so I tend to grade all my exams. But what I do is the students do them all online. They submit files that are named, but then I hash all the names, and I have basically a collection of randomly numbered files. I grade the randomly numbered files, and only after they're all graded do I then unblind them. So one year I'm teaching operating systems, and I unblind them, and my top scores are all my women. And I was surprised. Now wait a minute. Like, I'm a woman in tech. My women are rock stars. Like, why was I surprised? I was surprised because I test biased against women in science, and I know this. How many of you have ever taken an implicit association test, IAT? Couple, all the women in the room. Okay, so, homework assignment. Go to implicit.harvard.edu. It is a really fun little website where you can take implicit bias tests about gender and race and age and disability, like anything you can imagine. And let me warn you, you will learn things about yourself that will make you uncomfortable and sad. And that's okay. Okay? Being biased does not make us bad people. Being biased makes us human. These were survival traits once upon a time. What makes us bad people is if we are unaware of our biases and we choose to ignore them and we don't learn how to mitigate them. So yeah, I'm a woman in tech and I test biased against women in tech. So what do? I grade blindly. I make my TFs grade blindly. I take the IAT every single year. And before I meet with a new woman student who I haven't met, I do either a virtual or sometimes a physical whack upside the head and remind myself that this is a rock star computer scientist and needs to be treated with all the respect that a rock star computer scientist needs to be treated with. And I literally talk myself through that every time before I meet a new student. Because otherwise, my biases can take over and that would be bad. So, we all have to figure out what our biases is. Doesn't matter whether you're in the underrepresented group or not. You know, I know who I am. I don't lose sleep over it, but I do in fact take conscious steps every single day to make sure I overcome those biases. Whether I'm talking to my female students, my disabled students, my minority, doesn't matter. I know that my instincts aren't always right. So I hired a freshman this past year. She goes to one of these magnet schools in the DC area, the Thomas Jefferson High School. Total brilliant, brilliant person. And I call her my mythbuster because she is also a Harvard cheerleader. And I love that. I went to watch her cheer, I congratulate her, and I give her the hardest work I can because she's a rock star. That's how we need to deal with our biases. Okay? Finally, here is a message for those of you who are not in one of the underrepresented groups. Here is what all your colleagues in those underrepresented groups want you to understand. First, if I come to you and tell you that you did something that made someone uncomfortable, the first thing you need to do is understand that this was a huge act of courage and also an act of trust. Right? I am talking to you because I believe you don't mean to do this and you want to do better. So the first thing you have to do is shed the defensiveness and say thank you, because this is an act of trust. It's hard. It's not, when the first reaction is like, oh, I didn't mean to do that. It doesn't matter. This is an act of trust. We are entrusting you to help make our world better. So that's number one. Number two, listen. Listen really hard and try to understand what is being said. Parrot it back. Okay, I said this, you felt that because this. Right? Parrot it back. Let the person know you really get what they're telling you. Okay? And then the third part is respond. Right? And there are degrees of response. Right? The minimal acceptable response is, I'm sorry. Okay? It is not, but I didn't mean that. It is not, but she didn't mean it. It is not an excuse. It is, I'm sorry. The next step beyond that is, I'm sorry, and I will try to do better. Thank you for telling me. Okay? That's the B. All right? The A answer is, I'm sorry. I will try to do better. Is there anything I can do right now to make this situation better? And then you take action. Okay? So if we all do those things, and we all share this with our organizations, we will start to make this field way more inclusive than it is. If you haven't seen the report that just came out from the National Academies on sexual harassment in academia, it is a depressing and startling read, and my guess is that it applies not just to academia, but to other places as well. So there's some bedtime reading. So there is your assignment. As I said, easy to state, hard to do. It will take a lifetime, but if we all work at it, we will accomplish the amazing. So, thrilled to have you here. Delighted to have you as my colleagues in this effort. And it is exactly 11:46. All right, where are we next?
We're gonna go take a class photo. The steps of Baker. It's getting slightly sunny, so it's nice. And then we have lunch.
Can we leave our stuff here or
Yes.
no?